A concept I have is that there are physical consequences to spiritual decisions. And so I've noticed that in my own life.
Jadon, you come from a family of artists. How did you know you were an artist?
How did I know I was an artist, man? I loved acting when I first got the opportunity to do it. I remember my dad and my mom, they would play music. We would have boogie nights. Actually, Boogie Nights was a song that we used to dance to, I remember, but I was so short. When I was maybe 5 years old, I remember standing up on our living room little coffee table and dancing eye level with my parents. That might have been the first moment. But I also grew up loving stories, loving fantasy, seeing, movies like Harry Potter or just, fantastical stuff I fell in love with. And I think I started writing short stories and, drifted off and escaped reality. So I guess those would be the first moments.
And your mom and dad, are they both in the industry, or they were?
Yeah. So they are both still in the industry, much less so. My parents were very active in the 90s, definitely. My dad was an action hero kind of actor, Delta Force, also did soap operas. My mom did commercials. She had an American Express commercial that went for 13 and a half years, which was crazy. But she was, she had a couple small parts in movies. She worked with Arnold Schwarzenegger on Junior, where she was a pregnant woman. And she always tells this, story where she's sitting next to Arnold and she says something to him and she does this impression of him when she says that, he almost got her fired, and she was like, "Oh, she's too funny." And so she, that's her claim to fame on the film stuff. But yeah, my parents were both actors, and my dad taught acting classes, and I grew up in his acting classes.
Okay, oh, interesting. But then you probably already saw I shouldn't assume, but you may have seen a lot of the waiting around, a lot of the near misses.
No, I didn't. I don't know if I noticed that, because my dad was a writer as well, so he was always working, writing. My mom, was more stay at home when she wasn't doing gigs, and then my dad also at one point he had a job at Universal, right across the street from where we lived. So no, I didn't really notice that until I was in my late teens. I think I noticed it when we moved to Florida, and my dad started just fundraising his own movies. This was in the early 2000s, before self-tapes, and the way the internet is now, we were, when you move out of LA, you're out of LA, you're out of the network. Nowadays you can kind of be anywhere, but back in the day, it's 2004 I think we moved. I noticed a big shift when he stopped working on films and doing stuff. And then he started fundraising for his own movies, and then I saw how tough it could be. And that's when we started eating peanut butter on bread for a while. But I would say I noticed it, probably late teens.
Okay, so then you maybe learned sort of the ebb and flow of the tightening the belt, and then other days it's filet mignon or whatever.
No, because there would be days, or months where we would, a big thing would come in, and like even my dad living in Florida, he booked a couple big movies like into the 2010s. Dolphin Tale was a big one with Morgan Freeman, he booked, and things like that. But it wasn't as often as when he was starring in big movies, in the early 2000s, late 90s.
But it was in your blood. It sounds like that. You didn't let that scare you away.
No, I've always had this burning thing in here where I had these ideas and these stories and these things, this purpose of affecting people because of or trying to show people something or send a certain message has always been my something that's like a calling, I guess. Writing probably more than acting. I love acting so much, but writing is something I can't get away from. It's always just burning. And so if I were to step away from it, I don't know if I could fully shut it down.
It's funny you mentioned purpose, and that was actually my next question, which is I get the sense that you feel very strongly about things, and that whatever you do, it's very purpose driven,
Yeah.
or whatever you don't do. Has that always been in you?
Yes and no. I think growing up, purpose wasn't always my goal. You know how it is growing up as a kid, teenager. You just, want to hang out and be cool with whoever you're friends with, and be on people's good sides and stuff like that. I don't think I really found my purpose until I went through some traumatic stuff, 19, 20 years old, and turned my life around 180 degrees and really just dove into storytelling. I think before that it was kind of just, there wasn't purpose until I had a big life change.
How do you know that you're on the right path?
I think there's a sense of peace to guide you when you're on the right path. Like I was telling you guys, I just came from church. I think, I'm a Christian. I believe that, there's a guiding that the Spirit I'll know if it's on the path. You get kind of a feeling, people might not want to call it a spiritual thing. They might, but the gut feeling, for example, my mom would always say, always trust your gut. So I think it's an intrinsic feeling in your own being, to where even if something's chaotic or if something's wrong or if something's, dangerous that you're in, you can still feel a sense of calmness and peace because you're where you're supposed to be and you're just, going through that place. If you don't feel that, I would say you probably know where you should be, and go back to the last thing that you knew you were supposed to do.
So you've kind of tested yourself, it sounds like. How like we kind of don't test our intuition or whatever it is, and then we're like, you know what? I should have listened.
Yeah. Oh, that's one of the greatest themes of my stories I tell. A concept I have is that there are physical consequences to spiritual decisions. And so I've noticed that in my own life, right? If I walk off the path, if I fall off the road, that I literally at one point I got in a car accident for making bad decisions. And people might say, oh no, it was coincidence. You might have been in a bad headspace and you might have been this, but that was just a car accident. And I said no, because I was in prayer and saying like, I need a wake up call, like pull me out of this. And then I saw a motorcyclist wipe past me on the highway, and I thought, I literally had a vision of like an accident. I started praying over the highway, and then I came back on the highway later that night, 9-car accident. And so purpose is huge for me, and I think I veered off your original question.
Oh, this is great.
But yeah, there are, purpose, and for me, storytelling, it has to be purposeful. I think that's why Hollywood is failing in so many ways. I mean, you look at all these movies that are bombing, it's because there's no purpose. It's because people are just, they're just, throwing money at things that made money in the past that might have had purpose before, but the purpose now is to make money, and people see that and they're like, oh, well, this has no substance anymore. So let me, go watch this, or they go watch their favorite creator on, TikTok or Instagram who has purpose in their own little way. And so I think getting back to purpose in the cinema will draw audiences back.